Hello, everyone. I am bringing you a second video on the Faye theory of the missing 911 cases. I've got a few things here to add that I've researched myself, and I will put the links down below of the places where I found some of this stuff. Let's start out with what are the Fae? The beginning part of this is to do mainly with Irish and some British lore on the subject. I do hope to investigate other cultures and how their version of the Fae compares to 411, which should be very interesting. But we start first with the Irish Fae. Number one, the origin of them, there's a number of theories or beliefs. The first is that they are fallen angels, those who followed Lucifer, aka demons. The second is they are the dead that was not good enough for heaven, but not bad enough for hell, which would probably swell their ranks quite a bit, I would think. Number three, certain children of Eve, the story goes that she heard God coming and hid the children she had not yet washed. And God was angry with her for lying or for not keeping her kids clean. I don't know how you ever keep kids clean, but hey. And so he caused the children never to be seen, that she would never see them again. And they were sent underground, and that's where the Fae came from. Number four, it's often believed by some that it was an older race that lived in Ireland and England before the Celts came and drove them out, or before they died out. And the memory of them has changed over time. There's the fifth theory is that it's a twisting of ancestor worship, that family trees and myths are very important in that area of the world. Number six was that it was the previous gods before Christianity settled over the land, that they were dwindled down to small gods, as Terry Pratchett would call them, and eventually just became the Fae, the Tuatha De Danann. Number seven, this one is the one I see that would connect possibly most to 411, is that we've had these interactions with these beings, that they're interdimensional, or beings from another universe that has bumped up against ours. Current science, says these things are possible. Through all the theories that they are exploring that unites the regular and quantum laws that govern the universe. String theory, unified theory, other things like that say that, these things are possible. So maybe they've been here in contact with us all along, but what we call the Fae, that's what they are. What do they do with the people they kidnap in lore? I've talked before in videos about what people have explained have happened to them that have lived, the children. But in the lore, the children were either adopted because, I'll talk about this again, but that the genetics weren't so good, and the Fae and their children tend to be sickly. So they were often adopted, or they were used as servants, and sometimes treated kindly, and sometimes treated cruelly. There's also rumors, lore, that they were used for sport when they got older. Now that will link up sort of to I can see that linking up to the young men in urban areas that get kidnapped. I'm talking about that later in the video too. So, adults are often taken because they have a skill or a talent. They're poets and musicians, were well known to be taken back there. Today, it's scientists and brilliant people who are often taken. So that sort of links up. Women have been known to be taken as lovers, or for wet nurses way back when, or nannying, or even for breeding purposes. Again, the offspring of the Fae were not known to be very healthy, but interbreeding seemed to help that. This echoes greatly many people who claim to have been abducted or believe in being abducted by aliens. There's half-breeds going on. In lore, half human and half fairy children are supposed to be great sorcerers or magic practitioners. Morgan Le Fay being a prime example, and possibly Merlin, if they existed, in any form of history, but this is lore. So, you go with it. You go with it. I have a story of a fairy abduction that took place in Iowa in the 19th century in Victorian times. The Fairies of Dubuque. At last, Dubuque has gotten ahead of Des Moines. The aspirations of its later life has been realized. It has something that Des Moines has not. It has something that has been read about in song and story, and something nearly all people are supposed to dream about under the inspiration of hashish or refined essence of the poppy. It is something that every city might have had, we suppose, but which no city in Iowa, at least, has ever had but Dubuque. Therefore, the city founded on the basis of Galena, the lead mines, and the benefices of Julian Dubuque is ahead of other Iowa cities in one thing. Therefore, Dubuque is greater than any other Iowa town. Therefore, hooray for Dubuque. It is fairies that Dubuque has got. It doesn't know exactly what they are, but it has them. Like all other fairies, these fairies are very queer. A year ago, they took Miss Kitty Crow, the pretty daughter of Mr. Andy Crow, and made her invisible and carried her away with them. She has just returned. She would not have returned at all, she said, only because of her mysterious disappearance. The neighbors of her father, with the usual kindness of neighbors, began to account for her strange disappearance by saying that he had murdered her. The fairies had heard of this, and so sent Miss Kitty back to save the old gentleman from the present terrors of neighbor gossip and the possible terrors of Judge Lynch. Very fittingly, a grand feast was spread in honor of Miss Kitty's return. All the neighbors came in, just as they always do in the stories about fairies, to welcome Miss Kitty and to hear her tell of the wonders of her year's experience in fairyland. According to her report, they don't do all in the fairyland as we thought. They don't live in cups of flowers, dance on the sunbeams, play hide and seek in the meshes of Milady's hair, nor sip the honey of the sunshine, nor dance in the Colosseum of the lily by the moonlight, nor do any of the elfish and gnomish things that all good fairies are popularly supposed to do. Instead, Miss Kitty says that in her year with them, she spent the time traveling incognito over the country, riding in railway cars invisible to mortal eyes. If this is true, it be very disenchanting, and fairies are no better off than we poor mortals. But Miss Kitty doubtless told the truth, for Dubuque people always do, except when they're talking of Des Moines. 3 days Miss Kitty stated away from the fairies. On the 3rd day she told her married sister that she had to go again, that the fairies could do without her no longer, The sister followed her upstairs, and according to Dubuque Dispatch, after two queer-looking beings resembling men dressed in antiquated black, and with them the girl left the house. She saw them go up the street. There the story ends, so far as the outside world is given to know. None of us can compete with these things. We hasten on behalf of Des Moines to throw up the sponge and say at once, we will not even try to compete with Dubuque in this respect. Who would have thought of it? The Dubuque, the practical, so worldly, and not a poet to its name since McCreary left it. Since it has gone out of things in this way, we warn all cities competing with it for soldiers home to look out for it. For if it had all the fairies with it, who can be against it? It has the invincible heretofore. What will it not be now? That was from the Des Moines Register, the 28th of March, 1886. As you can tell, the tongue was firmly placed in cheek by the reporter, but it follows mostly what was claimed by Miss Kitty and her sister that had happened, which is a very strange story indeed. Why are the kidnapped disoriented and the searchers confounded? Fairies are known for their glamour, the ability to change what we see. They can cover landmarks, change the look of the land, and if 411 accounts are related, change what we are able to hear. They're supposed to have the ability to shapeshift and actually change their mass. So they could be a huge Bigfoot, dare we say, or a tiny winged girl that the size of a bug that would go unknown. I am so sorry for all the noise. My cat is refusing to cooperate and go away. They are also known to have control over the weather, which again lines up quite a bit with a lot of the accounts of the 911 disappearances, unpredicted storms coming through, searchers having a hard time. They are also known to have the ability to levitate and fly, which would explain why search dogs just lose the scent and why footprints just stop in the middle of nowhere. Fairies are known to have petty grievances. They will take offense to the easiest, littlest thing. And let's face it, we just don't listen to the old superstitions of don't do this, don't do that. I read a whole thing on a previous video about, for example, the berry picking, taking the wrong berries. You should only take the berries in the sun. The ones in the shade should not be touched. I know there's tons of unknown or forgotten rules that we've just dismissed as superstition. The color red being important in some areas. A lot of the people who go missing in New England were wearing red. Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to talk about the Manchester drownings. If you're familiar with those, there were 61 drownings in 6 years by 2015, and there's been more since then, which of course drew the attention of David Pilates, along with some strange disappearances of young college men in the U.S. They were called the smiley face killings because the strange smiley face was found nearby. One Manchester reader wrote on Facebook, averaging it out, it's about 10 bodies a year found in the canals. That is quite a bit. They don't have, I understand they have a few canals, but not that many. And that she also stated, I'm assuming it's a she, that all men that were of similar look and similar age, which, is very strange. Nowadays they yell serial killer, whereas 200 or more years ago, fairies would be blamed. They would think they'd had a Peg Pal or a Jenny Greenteeth or some sort of siren pulling in these young men. And again, the Americans found often in water, though they were not near water when they disappeared. They often have GBH in their bloodstream. They had been drinking, but they were close to home and there was no reason. They were strong young men that, most kidnappers would not pick if you're looking for a victim. And they appeared to be alive for most of the time they were missing, having only been dead a day or two before discovery. But no one knows where they were during that time. The next part I want to talk about is a great fascination to me and a vital link to the theory. The native little people or beliefs of fairy-type beings in America, in North America. I got this info from Otherworldly Oracle blog, which I will link down in the description. Myself, I live in an area that once belonged to the Shoshone people. They believe in little people with power. They call them the Nimerigar. They were believed to kidnap people, especially children. They were said to use poison arrows to protect their territory, very similar to the beliefs of the British Isles. One strange thing, though, is that a mummy was found in the San Pedro Mountains of a humanoid no taller than 12 inches in the 1930s. The mummy is quite obviously not a child or a baby. Of course, it could be someone with a certain type of dwarfism, but as far as I know, they haven't sequenced the DNA on that to say. I have also heard of a story of a young man that went camping around here. My brother told this story on the channel. And he went by himself up to a well-known area, and he liked to read when he was camping before he went to bed, and he woke up in the middle of the night, and his book was gone, and he saw a small humanoid creature that had taken his book. And that falls right along with this. Moving on to other areas, in Nova Scotia, Canada, the Ascotoni tribe have a firm belief of the little people who live on a certain mountain. No one will allow their children to go near that mountain for, they are known to be stolen by them. The Kanokasha of the Choctaw belief were known to capture young men and take them on a quest. 3 wise men would wait at a cave opening for the Kanokasha and the Choctaw boy and present the boy with 3 things: a knife, a bag of poisonous herbs, and a bag of healing herbs. If the boy chose the knife, he was destined to be a killer. If he chose the bag of poisonous herbs, he would provide bad medicine to his people. But if he chose the bag of good healing herbs, he would be a powerful medicine man. Just like the Hawaiians and the Shoshone, the Choctaw believed the little people lived in caves or under hills or in mountains, which also is mirrored in British and Irish lore with the fairy forts and the mounds. I was going to say something else. What was it here? The ceremony that they talk about here does remind me of the Tibetan ceremony of a baby choosing an item on a blanket and what that would mean for their future, which I find very fascinating to such distant cultures coming up with such close to the same things. The Cherokee believed that there were three kinds of little people: the Laurels, the Rocks, and the Dogwoods. The Rock people were malicious and stole children. The Laurel people were friendly but mischievous and liked to play tricks on the big people. They say the Laurel people will tangle your fishing line with a stick and make you think it's a huge fish until you reel it in and find yourself disappointed. The Laurels stay young at heart and seek to make others the same way. And as for the Dogwood people, they are good-hearted and take care of us. Some say the Dogwood people are similar to the Scottish Brownies. Now we move on to Hawaii, and I've narrated a story on the Menehune of Hawaii before. They are said to be mischievous, but could be deadly too, and are very fascinating. The Crow called them the Nairumbi, and they lived in the Pryor Mountains and they were said to give visions to Plenty Coups, who was an early 20th century Crow chief. They helped him lead the people and keep them united. And every time they passed the Pryor Mountain, they left offerings, much like offerings are left for the fair folk in Western Europe. I know even in Denmark, they leave out, especially at Yuletide, offerings of food for the people, for the little people. What are your feelings about this theory? I really like it. I like it. I think it's my most favored theory on the 411 disappearances. Does it seem more or less plausible than any others? Why would the government be hiding evidence of this? And what do you think they know? I'd love to hear what you think, if you have any stories or leads or ideas or so forth on this. Thank you for joining me for this video, and a special thanks to my Patreon supporters, Ermin, Darren and Jennifer, Laura, and Charlotte Emerson. If you like this, please hit the little button to let me know. If you didn't, hit the little button to let me know. Leave a comment. I'm always glad to talk with you, my darlings. I'm open to suggestions and criticisms, critiques. If you have not subscribed, please do so and ring the little bell so you know when to come up and see me. And I will talk to you next time, my darlings. Farewell.